Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Tacoma Cyclist. I am the Tacoma Cyclist, and not with me today is the Boogeyman. He is elsewhere at the moment, so I'm going to comment and share some details about this race on my own. Maybe he'll join me for some future videos. He will join me for some future videos. So today we're going to talk through some strategy about Zwift racing. You'll notice here I'm in the starting pen of the Zwift race. I actually spend quite a bit of time warming up before I get here, but I do it if possible, in world. This is the volcano flat, so I'd had the opportunity to warm up on the volcano flat before I got here. But something else I want to stress, if you're going to do some Zwift racing, let's make sure that your stats are correct, all of your details are correct. So go ahead and hop on your scale and make sure your measurements are correct. Make sure your weight is entered accurately because no one likes a weight doper. I actually entered it at 65, but hey, that was a late in the day weight. All right, notice if you've not done Zwift racing before, you're going to notice the power always starts off fast, always starts off hard. Some races stay that way for a pretty long time. Other races, you just gun it from the start. You give it about 5-10 seconds, and then the race, the power starts to settle in. It almost always settles in higher than the watts per kilogram for your category. So I'm racing the category Bs this time, which is a 3.2 to 4.0 watts per kilogram, or 3.9 is your maximum upper. There's some calculations they do on that. It's not just 3.9 watts per kilogram for the entire race. It's really, I think, a 20-minute effort times 0.5% or minus 0.5% or something. So if you're really pushing the upper limits of your race, then you might want to consider just upgrading, because you might want to getting force upgraded anyway, and there's nothing like getting DQ'd from one of these events. Put in a lot of effort and get DQ'd. That kind of sucks. So like I said, spend some time warming up in world if possible. Survey the course. I mean, you certainly have the ability to do that with most courses. You can't pre-ride the crit course because there's no option to opt in on that. But you can pre-ride most of the other courses if you're going to be doing a race. I would strongly encourage you to do that. Now, one of the things you're going to find with Zwift racing that is very, very different from regular road racing, and I've got another video I'm going to do on crit racing as well, because there is the crit course. It's probably, in my opinion, more similar to regular crit racing, but it's still, there are differences. In road racing, I've never been in a road race before where you literally keep the power going the entire time. You'll notice I cut throughout this video. I've only made it about a 10-minute video. But you'll notice my power never dips. Well, it dips, but it never really drops off. I never soft pedal. I never cruise or freewheel. You just can't do that in Zwift. As a matter of fact, I'm sitting here fighting for 57th place out of 142. If I were to soft pedal or freewheel for even a moment, I would be off the back. And now that brings up another point about Zwift racing. If you get gapped, even a little bit, 1-2 second gap, you're going to have a much harder time closing down that gap than you would in a regular road race. The gap opens up very, very quickly, and you're going to have a hard time chasing it down. So what I would strongly encourage you to do is to be very mindful of your positioning within the pack. Look for those gaps that look like they're starting to appear. And if the gap looks like it's about to appear, get over that gap. Close it down fast. You'll notice when dirt kicks up on some of these courses, it's sometimes very hard to see. And in a few minutes, you're going to see that I almost get gapped because some of the dirt that's being kicked up, you can't see what's going on, and all of a sudden there's a gap in front of you. You've got to close that fast. You can't let it open up to 3 or 4 seconds. If you do, it's just over. It's done. Now you'll notice I'm putting out a lot of power consistently throughout this. And again, that's the major theme here. You don't have downtime with Zwift races. Road races, obviously you're doing a 3-hour road race. You're not going to pedal for a large portion of that race. Not the case with Zwift. Now most of the races aren't 3 hours on Zwift, but still 1 hour at pretty darn near your threshold is going to be pretty tough. So move up and back in the pack. If you're pushing a little too hard, and ease off your power, but you can't ease off a whole lot. If your FTP is around 4 watts per kilogram or 4.5 watts per kilogram, you're going to want to find a way to drop it down to 3.5 watts per kilogram for a little while, or you're going to burn yourself out. You can't go to 0. You can't go to 1 watt per kilogram, or you'll get spit right out the back, but you certainly can back it off a little bit and then move up through the pack. Well, how do you move up through the pack? Unlike regular road races, you don't have to worry about elbowing people out of the way to get up there or risking a centerline DQ. With these races, you can just simply move through. Now, if you're behind a bigger person, and take note on these corners real quick. I'll come back to corners in a second. If you're behind a bigger person on Zwift, sometimes it can be very hard to move up because you have to put out a lot more power than that person to actually move forward in the race. So be prepared for a bit of a push if you want to move forward. Sometimes that initial hard, almost like a sprint, like a little kick, is going to help you get around the person in front of you. But again, you don't have to worry about touching wheels or whatever and going down. Just go hard. Now, corners are important in Zwift, especially on Zwift racing. Everybody thinks they're taking a bad line through a corner. I've seen so many complaints online about why is it my avatar takes terrible lines through corners. Everybody's does, don't worry. What you can do is, as you're going through a tight turn, and I'm going to show you this more in the crit. By the way, I'm about to get almost dropped here, so keep an eye out during this dirt section here. You'll notice the visibility goes to nothing. But during turns, during corners, about a second or so before the corner actually appears, bump the power up a bit. I mean, we don't need to go for a sprint, but if you're averaging, like I am, around 270, 280 for this race, then you're going to want to maybe go to 350, 380 for 1 to 2 seconds. And what you're going to find is you'll move up from 50th place to like 15th place if you do that. Okay, so in just a moment here, you'll see that kind of a gap starts to open up, and I really couldn't see it. The visibility here is next to nothing. But again, what you're going to want to watch for is those little gaps that appear, because that little gap becomes a really big gap really, really fast. So you can see there's a little bit of a stretch out here. There's a guy in a kind of a grayish white jersey up there in front of us. And I just realized, oh crap, look at that, there's a gap. So you got to put the power down a little bit. I'm not going crazy here. I'm not going to do a 1,000-watt effort to catch that. You might have to sometimes, but I caught it soon enough that it wasn't the end of the world. So did this other guy, also realized that and moved his way up. Now, in Zwift races, what I've tended to find is that for the first half of the race, you want to be in the top half of the wheels. That's where the fewest amount of gaps are going to appear. That first half, be in the top half. So you notice this is the first half of this race. I'm in the top half of the pack. Towards the back of that, though, you're going to find that a lot of gaps start opening up. Now, I fast forwarded a lot here. The key is now we're much closer to the end of the race, and now it's really important. Look at how many, I'm in 48th out of 142, so I'm in the top third of the race. Only a couple spots behind me right now is where the huge gaps are. 21 seconds, a minute and a half, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. When you're getting towards the last half of the race, you really want to be in the top third of the pack within the Zwift race. I don't sit up at the front on these races for a couple really good reasons. First of all, if I'm at the front, chances are, because I'm a smaller guy, I only weigh 143 pounds, so 65 kilograms, on Zwift, kind of like in the real world, but maybe a little bit more exaggerated. If you're light, you still got to put out the same amount of power as the heavy guys, but that means your watts per kilogram is much higher. If I'm light, I run the risk of being DQ'd because my watts per kilogram are over the specified range. And I almost always sit on the 3.9 watts per kilogram threshold on these races. You'll notice most of the time in here, my power is sitting around 4 watts per kilogram, 4.2, 4.5 watts per kilogram. I have to actively find time and space to not plow through at that power, and sometimes I actually have to sit up on purpose. So if you see me dropping my wattage, it's because I'm far enough up in the pack. I'm not overly concerned about it. I'll drift back on purpose so that way I can lower my wattage. Not a whole lot. 2.5 to 3.5 watts per kilogram is still, you're going to get dropped at that pace. So you can only do it for a few seconds. Now, again, I work my way up and back in the pack. I'm actively concentrating on doing that. And that's really important, is paying attention to where you are. It's really important also to look at the sidebar there and see, where your placement is right now, 9, 10 out of 142. That's great, but notice where the gaps are too. So if you filter your way to the back, which I'm kind of working my way into doing right now, you'll start to see at the bottom of the list, you'll start to see where those gaps are if you get back towards the back. So right now I'm in 39th place, probably, I'll drift around there. 46th place. Okay, here we go. I'm at the very back of the front pack, okay? The gaps are behind me. I'm the last person. So right here, I probably don't want to be in this position. I'm going to go ahead and put out a little bit more power to get up there. I don't want to be the last guy, because then all of a sudden you find yourself being gapped. Not a good position to be in. So the line is getting stretched out. When the line starts to get stretched out, that's when gaps happen. So my goal here is to just pick it up just a touch, get myself into the 4.5 to 5 watt per kilogram range. I'm starting to see a little bit open up there. I don't want to be in that position. So, but here's the thing. I actually kind of did this on purpose, and I apologize to D. Duncan in advance. I was actually looking at my phone. We're coming into the last 1K of the race, and I was actually going to cut over my camera, and you'll see in just a second, I'm cutting my camera over to watch the Boogeyman because he's coming into this final sprint. Big shout out to the Boogeyman. This was a 10 race series, and out of the B category, which had over 450 participants, he took first place in the entire race series, so big shout out to him for that. I was cutting over to his view, sitting up. I really wasn't interested in sprinting with the finish. I don't have sprint. I suck at sprinting. If I don't get away on a climb, or if I don't get away on a breakaway, it's just not happening. So I cut over to his camera. He does a great sprint here. Not his best. I think he got maybe 4th or 5th place on this race overall. Usually he's really good at the long sprint, the 300 to 400 meter sprint, where he can hold a really high amount of power for a very long period of time. But you'll see what's happening towards the end of the sprint here. Only a few hundred meters left to go. People are, just like in a regular road race, really starting to turn the screw. They're not full power yet, but they're still sitting at 5, 6, 7 watts per kilogram coming into this final sprint. If you want to be in contention for the sprint, be prepared at 1 to 2K to go to really start ramping up that power. And you're just going to have to sit there and hold it. So here we go into the sprint. Most people are doing around 10 to 12, maybe 13 watts per kilogram. Every once in a while you have a boost over top of that. Yes, of course, there are people that can do 20 watts per kilogram. Rock on with them bad selves. They're amazing people. But generally, if you're in the 10 to 13 watt per kilogram range, you're probably going to be able to contest these sprints just fine. So that was the end of the race there. Boogeyman took top few places. Super proud of him. He's been working really, really hard. And like I said, he took first place in the overall series with a couple first place wins, several second and several third place wins out of the 10. So super proud of him for that work. So again, this was the strategy for road races. We're back on my camera again. I'm just sitting up. I have no interest in contesting because, well, I kind of suck. I'm not a sprinter. Like I said, if it comes down to a sprint, I can lead you out. I cannot sprint. So I'm not overly concerned about it. What you'll notice, if you see some folks here on the right-hand side that have a heart rate and they don't have a number there, they got disqualified. So the Boogeyman took 5th place. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, all of the folks above him actually kept their results because they had heart rate monitors. They were using power meters. If you're not using a power meter, you're not using a heart rate monitor, you are going to get disqualified in the final standings. So bear that in mind. Okay, so here are a couple of just really quick tips on road races in Zwift. The next video, we're going to talk a little bit about crits in Zwift. They are different than road races in Zwift. Still fun. I don't know which one I prefer more. But I will say the crits are fun, and if you like crit racing, but you're afraid of getting killed, maybe Zwift crit racing is for you. So stick around for that video. That's going to come out real soon. I'll put some commentary behind that as well. Spoiler alert: the Boogeyman does really well in that race as well. So that's all I have to say on these races this time around. Just if you like this video, if you have any things you'd like to see me do differently, first, give me a thumbs up. We always love it when that happens. Otherwise, put some information in the comment section below about what we can do differently, and we will do our best to listen. If you have questions, put them down there. I'll try to pay attention to those and respond to questions as we get them. If you haven't already, subscribe. We're pretty close to 1,000 subscribers. I'd love to get to 1,000 subscribers by July 1st. I don't know if that's going to be possible, but maybe share some of these videos with your friends and encourage them to subscribe as well. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.